Good morning, everyone. I'm Christy Connor, the host of Friday Coffee Meetup. We're really happy you're here today. We have an exciting guest that I'm going to introduce in a minute. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about Friday Coffee Meetup. We are the largest active innovation, entrepreneurial, and tech meetup in Los Angeles, California. And we have over 7,000 members, whom we're very, very grateful for. Traditionally, we are an in-person meetup at Cross Campus, a local co-working venue, but we've actually switched over to virtual during the COVID-19 home restrictions. So we are happy to be able to have people around the world join us. I see some people on the line already. I see some East Coast people. So we're happy to have you online today with us. Although you are seeing my face right now, there is actually a whole host of people that work on this team to bring this content to you every week. These are their faces. We have people who do things from helping us to get our speakers to our podcast and our YouTube channel as well. I have put the information for our podcast and YouTube channel into the chat window, so you can check that out there. We have had speakers, many different speakers on many subjects. So if you're looking to learn something, that is a great place for you to go. All our videos are there, so check them out, brew some coffee, and check those out. Today, we are going to be doing a different format. We're going to be having a conversation between Mike Schaffer and Dave Jordan, and they're going to be talking about how to be consistently successful. It's going to look a little different today, but we are excited. Our format will remain the same. We are leaving the chat window. It's unmoderated. So go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A panel. You can find the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead and put your questions there. That will help us manage our questions. I will warn you, we like very succinct questions. A question is a sentence with a question mark at the end. If your questions are very long or difficult to get through acronyms, we might not choose your question. So be very succinct in your questions. And we will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if we don't get to your question, don't be sad. You actually will have another opportunity to possibly ask your question in our networking, which will happen at the end of the event. If you're interested in staying around for open networking, please stay on the line. After we turn off the recording, we will move those who are interested over into the panelist pool, and you'll be able to interact with our speaker as well as the other attendees and do some open networking. So with that, I am really excited to introduce Dave Jordan. He's with Format Entertainment. He's going to talk to us today about being consistently successful. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Mike Schaffer to continue with the introduction and discussion with Dave. Oh, you're on mute, Michael.
Thanks, Christy. Dave, I'm really excited to have you join us today. And you and I have talked for the last couple months about collaborating on stuff and hearing your story over the years of success building and running Format Entertainment. It's exciting for us to talk about. For those of you that don't know Dave's background, so he's a music supervisor. He's been working on all the Marvel movies for years, as well as a number of other movies. But Dave, could you give us a little bit of background about you and Format Entertainment?
Yeah, Format Entertainment, I started in 2001, and I started it as a kind of a music supervision collective. And music supervision is you work for the filmmakers and you help take and create the vision for music in visual media. And a lot of supervisors were independent operators, kind of them and their assistant. And I saw an opportunity to kind of put these people in the same room together and share ideas and you know, do the old 2 + 2 = 5 routine. And now my company is the largest theatrical music supervision company in the world. We also do a lot of TV. We do brands. So it's a creative collective. It's structured like that. And we work for every studio in town, but we also are the outsourced music department for Marvel Studios, and we are the outsourced music department for Lionsgate Pictures. Both because they see more value in having what we're able to do on the outside as opposed to on the inside within their own systems.
That's awesome. What I'm most excited about talking to you is, so I run a marketing and advertising agency, and it's a very similar model to what you do. And you've built a successful business and have worked on some pretty amazing projects. So a couple of the questions that I want to talk about throughout this conversation is getting to know how you're able to piece together this collective and how you're able to keep the new people that you bring in excited about projects, keeping the studios excited about projects. I know you've worked on some pretty amazing things, and I didn't realize this. I knew you were there at the very, very beginning of Marvel Studios, but you were telling me earlier, you actually predate Marvel Studios. How did you get involved with them from the beginning?
So I was an independent music supervisor and had done independent movies and had started to move into the getting opportunities to work on kind of low-level films, studio films. And I got a phone call from, this was 2001, I believe, if I remember correctly. And I just started my company, didn't have anything. I just decided I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. I wanted to work for myself. And I got a phone call from the head of Fox, head of music for Fox Pictures, a guy named Robert Kraft. And he had a problem on a movie, and he didn't have much money, and he said, look, I need a favor. I need somebody to come in and fix a problem for me. And you have a reputation of somebody who can kind of get things done in a quick manner. And he said, do me this favor and I'll, maybe I can put you in a room with some other filmmakers and, you can land some bigger gigs. And of course I did the project for him. I made no money on the project. And, but I was just thrilled to get a phone call from such a kind of high level this guy was a kingmaker in a lot of ways. And so, and one of the rooms he put me in very early on was he put me in the room to work on a movie called Daredevil, which was the Ben Affleck Daredevil. I had collected Marvel comic books for all of my childhood, and I hadn't read comic books for many, many years. But he had put me in the room, and there were 3 other people or 4 other people that were up for the gig, and they were all people with big credits, and there was no chance I was going to get the gig. But I was like, you know what, this is going to be a great learning experience. I'm going to be really prepared. And I went into the room, and I had, back then it was CDs. I had a big bag of CDs, and I had made my mixes of music for the director, for the various characters, for Daredevil and Elektra and all this kind of stuff. And I got into the room, and the director and I started talking, and he was a comic nerd. And I was a comic nerd, and we talked about the character of Daredevil. And about an hour into it, he looked at me, because we both had read the comic books. And about an hour into it, he said, you should do the music for my movie. And I said, great, I would love to do the music for your movie. And as I was walking out of that meeting, it was one of the really important lessons I had learned. I had my hand on the door handle. I realized he and I, the director, had never talked about music. The entire meeting, we had talked about Daredevil. And I had the CD, and I was so proud of the CD I was going to give him. And I thought, nah, I'm going to take the yes. And I walked out and signed my contract, and then sent him the music. And fortunately, he liked the music, and it was very successful. From that movie, I launched a band called Evanescence off that movie, and it went on to sell 16 million records worldwide. It was a massive soundtrack. And many, many years later, I'd done a few other licensed Marvel movies. I got introduced to Kevin Feige, who now currently runs Marvel. He was the #2 at the time. When eventually, when Marvel went on to raise their own capital and start their own company and kind of chart their own destiny, because up till Iron Man, everything had been a license to the studios, and so they were secondary license holders on it. I got a phone call and they said, "Hey, we're raising money." They had raised a bunch of money from Goldman, and said, "We're going to make a music studio, and we need help with the music, and you could do the music stuff." And I said, "You want me to create a music department?" And they were like, "No, you just do it," because they didn't know how it worked. So it gave me an opportunity to, it kind of injected the ability for me to scale my business into the outsourced music department that exists, that the company currently exists as.
And at that time, when you took that opportunity, you were given that opportunity, you took advantage of it. Marvel wasn't what it is now, at all. It was not the big opportunity that you would think, oh my gosh, I've made it, right?
Correct. When like I said, I had done a few different properties. I'd done early Fantastic Four, I'd done early Punisher, and these were all for Fox and Sony and these various studios. But when Marvel started, it was started by a guy named Ike, who was a toy guy who owned the Marvel brand. And Ike is an incredibly frugal person. And when they were talking about making Iron Man was my favorite character. And I said to my agent at the time, I said, "Listen, I'm going to do this movie." And she said, "Look, they're offering no money. It's a horrible deal." And I said, "I don't care. Like, it's a classic kind of follow your passion." I'm like, they're not making an Iron Man movie without me being involved. There's just no way in the universe that's happening. And so I did Iron Man. Iron Man was very successful for them. It launched the studio. But for the first, I've done 25, 26 movies for them. For the first part of my career with them, I was making probably a fifth of what I typically make on a property, on a film, that I was making on other movies at other studios at the time. But it was a chance for me to, it was a loss leader, right? It didn't matter if they paid me anything, because being able to talk about Iron Man or any of these other characters, these successful movies at a high level, global, being able to go into other studios and talk about those successes got me more money at other studios. So, and it led to a long, obviously a very long-standing relationship. Even when Marvel was eventually purchased by Disney, the way these things typically work is, the Disney music department takes over. And in this case, because of my long-standing relationship with Marvel and with the head of Marvel, I was kind of employee #2 of Marvel. They continue to keep it completely outside. So I don't answer to anybody but the head of Marvel. I don't answer to Disney. I don't answer to the music people at Disney.
Yes. So instead of answering to necessarily the corporations, you built your own company with your own employees. Typically, I think you mentioned a music supervisor is usually a one-man shop. They're going from gig to gig. How did you put 2 and 2 to equal 5, as you described it? How did you put that together and start bringing people in to help and form the company? Because I think that's what's so impressive is you've built this company to do this.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I approached it was, it's like herding cats, right? In the creative space, it's all about the relationship you have with the director or with the CMO or whatever it is. It's a very personal relationship. So it's very difficult to add other people into that relationship. So even to this day with Marvel, I am the person who talks to the head of Marvel. But I saw all the other supervisors around me have the same limitations. They really couldn't grow their business because they didn't have the ability to duplicate themselves. So my thought process was, okay, everybody bring your fiefdoms into this collective and we'll share the back office. And so that was the initial genesis. And again, because it's all individual fiefdoms, back then it was playlists, like you have better records than everybody else, so you don't want to share your records. And I found that I found that mentality is very limiting. It's a fear-based mentality. And so once I was able to get people, I think initially the company, we had 6 different music supervisors, and everybody did their own thing. But over time, it created bondings. And as people's careers started to grow, they were like, I can't do this, but I trust this other person in this creative collective with me. So then they would team up. Now the company is in such a way that I describe it as it's kind of like a big box of Legos where there's lots of different colors, but you can just put Legos together. So if there's somebody who's a specialist, like let's say somebody has a relationship with a director, but somebody else in the company is a real specialist, let's say in the hip hop space, that person may go to that hip hop specialist music supervisor and say, hey, why don't we team up on this? I'll handle the politics, I'll handle the filmmakers, you handle the music, the taste, and the artists. And by being free with those relationships, it's created a sense of community where all the boats have been raised. And we constantly accelerate and raise up the younger supervisors and the younger creatives that are coming up. Like we try to put them in the room as quickly as possible. We train them on best practices, but we try to put them in the room very quickly. And we've been able to retain a lot of loyalty because of that. Because usually they're stuck at an agency, they would be stuck in the mailroom for 2 years, and then they'd get on a desk, and then so we try to, because it's beneficial to 48-year-old Dave Jordan when we're talking about, who's blowing up on TikTok, for me to have younger people in the room with me to help me with the creative process.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I'm a big believer in giving people an opportunity, and it's exciting to hear you tell a story of somebody giving you an opportunity, and then you passing that on and finding other people to bring an opportunity to, and seeing them take advantage of it. You talk a lot about recently you've worked on a lot of hip hop projects, and I know just from you and I, talking, you're very heavily in that space. How did you identify that that's a market to really focus in and bring talent in and collaborate with artists? How did you know hip hop was an area to go into as a music supervisor?
So besides the fact that I'm a huge hip hop fan, this is such a specialized thing in my world of supervision, in that hip hop, because of the way that hip hop music is made, in the organic nature of the way hip hop music is made in the studio, and people will add verses, and what happens is it's not the same as the Rolling Stones going into the studio and recording an album. On hip hop, there may be 10 people involved in a song. And there may be samples involved with the song, which add a whole nother layer of licensing issues. So all of this to say, hip hop is the most difficult music to work with in the licensing space for film and TV. And so somewhat out of necessity, when you start in music supervision, all the higher level licensing people, music supervisors, they don't want to do hip hop. It's a lot of work and it's really complicated. So it slides down to all the newbies. It's like one of the ways we screen out a lot of people, like, how serious are you about wanting to do this? Because there's a whole licensing business side you have to deal with. So I saw an opportunity, because hip hop is, by the nature of the creative process in hip hop, most hip hop is difficult to the business side of it. I saw an opportunity to kind of create. I knew as a music supervisor, I wanted to license more hip hop than I was able to, because it was either A, really expensive, or difficult to clear. So I started creating. I put together kind of what I did in the music supervision side, I did on the creative side, where I brought in a lot of writers and singers and rappers, and I created a collective that looked more like a business and less like a rabble of talent in a studio. And so that I just got that reputation, and I worked with a lot of first-time African-American filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers that were making transitions from, having shot Jay-Z's last video to their first theatrical feature. And so it's just been kind of ingrained in my DNA as a music supervisor. And hip hop also happens to be the most popular music in the world, or especially in the United States. So it's the most often used music in film and TV. Every party scene in every movie has hip hop in it.
Yeah, so it sounds like, you took the entrepreneurial spirit of when you started Format Entertainment and how you started to, materialize the business, and found another entrepreneurial opportunity with disrupting, this business model that didn't really work. The title of this presentation is really how you be consistently successful. And over 20 years, you more than almost anybody I've met have been consistently successful and been part of very successful projects. What are the things, like lessons learned, if you will, or the mistakes you've made that you go, oh my God, like I cannot believe I did that, but you got through it. And what kinds of things can you talk about in that realm?
I think I think the number one thing is what I have seen in Hollywood space, but I think this is true whenever there's a lot of money and a lot of egos involved, is the humility part, is the, I heard it before when I was younger, and I have learned it to be so true. It's really easy to have a hit. Anybody can have a hit once. You can if you do enough movies or records or business ventures or what, you will eventually have a hit. You will step into shit, for lack of a better. You'll hook up with somebody smarter than you, and you'll get dragged along and have a hit. So many people have the one hit, but they don't know how they did it. They don't kind of reverse engineer and go, how did that, what were the things about that thing that was when I say hit, I'm using terminology from the entertainment business, but success, right? How did that happen? And what was my part in it? And what was the part I didn't know about that this other person? So my whole thing was, I want to have longevity in a field that is very youth oriented, right? I'm in the pop culture business, so it's constant turnover. And I was like, and I'd seen a lot of my contemporaries burn very fast. They would burn in 5 years. They would have hit, and then nothing. And so I was like, how do I create stability? How do I inject new creative thoughts into this and keep it, as they say in the military, keep it frosty, I think is what they say. Like, how do I keep it frosty? And so that is something that it underlies everything that I do. And the other side of that is humility, being humble. People get really caught up in success. They really think that they are Elon Musk. They're not. They're usually you didn't actually do it alone. You did it with other people, and everybody brought something to the table. And yes, maybe you led it, or maybe you were the number two, or maybe you were the person with the best idea. But usually there's many people involved in the process. And in film, it's a great example of it, or specifically like a Marvel movie, you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of behind the scenes people that make those movies. And at the highest level of that studio, not all studios, but at that studio, it's a highly collaborative process. There's the fear, one of the things I've seen there is the fear is taken out of the room. So there are no bad ideas. And so that's what I try to do in my own career, is not to be overbearing, or in my own business is try to not be overbearing, and to sweep the fear out of the room and let people feel they can freely talk while they're in the room. So that's just like some of the lessons that I've learned. And also a big one for me, you talk about mistakes. I have a publishing company, and my best friend ran my publishing company for many years. And it worked in the beginning, and then it started not working. And I didn't want to terminate that person because it was going to terminate a friend. And I couldn't figure out how to navigate around that. And while I was so busy over the course of a year figuring out how to keep this person, keep it going, meanwhile, it was creating toxicity all around everybody else within my company. And I've had that several times, and I've learned the best thing to do with toxic people is you have to cut them immediately. You can, if they're going through something personal, that's one thing. You can help them. You can, if they have to go to rehab, whatever those things are. But toxic people are toxic for your business. And one of the things you have to learn, and I've suffered through it, is you have to cut those people. You have to sweep them out.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot about that, in the past, about toxic people and relationships in that way. And I found the same thing. One of the things when you get rid of that toxic environment, and it's so important in a business like mine and in a business like yours, collaboration is so important. And how do you foster having the collaboration and people feeling like their voice is heard, but you've got so many people as part of the process and maybe have a stronger voice that don't know the inner workings and all the behind the scenes of went into some of the decision making, and somebody higher up says, nope, we're not doing that. How do you continue the collaboration when there's so many voices in the room?
You're talking about on the client side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of this is just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of old school business, right? It's like, I know how to control my environment as far as my creative process and how to foster creativity in collaboration within my sphere. On the client side, some of it's pretty old school. I am, figure out who's got the power in the room, and then and then work towards bringing. And sometimes there's two people with power in the room. Is trying to bring people together while keeping an eye at all times on your vision, right? What they hired you for. Because so often you get hired and they say, "Oh, I love your work on XYZ." They don't really want XYZ. They want what their teenage daughter told them is really cool. And look, that challenge always exists. I also try to take my ego out of it and look at, is what his teenage daughter saying cool? Like, is it interesting, or is that just a really bad idea? Because the instinct is, what does your teenage daughter know about instead it's like, well, that's an interesting idea. and then maybe molding that into, yeah, that's a good idea. Here's how you amplify that, right? You're in the amplification business, right? How do you amplify? How do you make that a more marketable, worldwide, global, I think in global space all the time. Marvel is a global company. The movies I work on usually are global. So I'm always, how do I amplify those things? I have had situations, I've never been let go off a project, but I've had a number of projects that I quit. And I found a lot of power in quitting. When you're not being treated correctly, or they're not really listening to your ideas, sometimes it's better to say, listen, it's kind of, it's not you, it's me routine when you're breaking up with somebody. It's very, very powerful to be willing to walk away. Not in a, just, hey, I believed I was hired for X reason. We've now spent whatever 3 months going down rabbit holes, and it feels like it's not really something that we're seeing eye to eye on. I think maybe you should look for somebody else. While I said I've quit a number of projects, they've never let me go. There's a lot of power in saying, you know what, no thank you. And it's a tact that I very rarely use, but it's very effective. And I used it when I had no projects and no money.
That's awesome.
And that's you know what I'm saying?
It's time to use it. Personally.
Yeah, it's the fear piece though. It's the fear piece. You've got to step past the fear piece and just be like, you know what? Because you aren't the right person. If they're not really listening to you, or they don't like your ideas, it's like, man, you should really hire your teenage daughter, because clearly she has better ideas than I do.
Right. So I'm going to start popping into the Q&A panel. So if you're listening or watching and you have a question, write your question in the Q&A panel, and I'll start reading some of them. Taking a step back to the beginning of your career, we started with how you got into Marvel, and you were given this opportunity, you prepared for it, you went after it, you got it. You are already a music supervisor. How did you get into, because a music supervisor is already, high up on the chain. How did you get into that? Where did you start? How would somebody else get into being a music supervisor?
So I was a assistant in the record business, and I really wanted to do A&R, and I was doing A&R for a little while, and I realized I really didn't want to do A&R. It's like when you come to Hollywood, everybody who comes to Hollywood and wants to be in the music business wants to be an A&R, and everybody who's in the entertainment side wants to be a director. And then you realize, oh, maybe I don't want to do those things, or maybe you do. And in the course of, I was at Atlantic Records, and in the course of working at Atlantic Records, we would do some soundtracks, and but they weren't priorities, and so they kind of slid onto my plate as an assistant, and I helped put them together. And during that process, I would talk to music supervisors who were on the outside, who worked for directors. And I would ask them, like, what is your job? And they said, oh, I work for the director. I put music in the film. And I went, it was like a light bulb. It was like finding out that I could be an astronaut. Like there was a path for me to get on a spaceship and go to the moon. And I was like, so wait a minute, somebody pays you to be creative all day and put music into film? That's a job that people do and get paid and can support their family with? And so the problem is I couldn't figure out how to get there. Like, how do you, I always say, like, was there a bar I could go to where all the directors were, where I could be like, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Directors, I would like to work you. And so the entrepreneurial side of me said, I'm going to go wherever directors are. And in my head at the time was, I'm going to go to a film festival. And so I made up business cards that said Dave Jordan, music supervisor, right? It's old school tactic. I had never music supervised anything. I really didn't know anything about it. But if you put it on a card, people believe it. So I went to Sundance on for my holiday break, for my vacation from the record labels 2 or 3 years in a row. And I met people, and I handed out cards, and I just did the old school street level hustle. And what you find out is most people at Sundance or wherever, they are also wannabe directors. So some of them are real directors, and most of them are wannabes. And the good thing is you only need 10% of the wannabes to become directors. And so over time, I did a lot of stuff for free or for nothing. Fortunately, I had kind of a day job, if you will. And those directors started to make films. But there were like 10 years or 8 years where every movie I did was an independent movie that no one has ever heard of and ever saw. And so when I got the opportunity to do my first theatrical movie, which was a Fox movie, which was Dude, Where's My Car? I said—
Great movie, by the way. Great soundtrack, I mean.
I said, now that I'm going to enter the studio system, this is my moment, right? This is the opportunity for them to see that I know what I'm doing, how to do it. And so I was omnipresent. I showed up. So much of life and so much of success is showing up. And I showed up so much that I got married on a weekend. I said I do to my wife. I got on a plane and I flew back for the first day of the dub on Dude, Where's My Car? That was my— Fortunately, my wife's a music supervisor, so she's like, go, get the, you got to get the gigs. So it worked out fine. I ended up doing 4 movies for that director, and it started a relationship with Fox. Everything came out of it that I needed to come out of it. It started a relationship with Fox. I ended up doing 20 plus movies for Fox, and to this day still work with Fox. So it's, so much of it is like
Tunnel vision, yeah. I think that entrepreneurial spirit of showing up, being present, taking advantage of opportunities when they come around, networking, using a lot of old school tactics that, maybe there's technology that can help that, but that's fascinating. You've worked on recently, I do want to talk a little bit about the collaboration on Black Panther with Kendrick Lamar. That was kind of a big deal. I think there's a lot of buzz around that. And it ties into one of the questions that came up is why are hip hop tracks so difficult to clear? Is it because of samples or other reasons? And talk a little bit about the collaboration with Kendrick Lamar and Black Panther.
So on that movie, I got the one of the highlights of my career, one of my highlights of my life is I got to work with a very talented filmmaker named Ryan Coogler, who had made Creed 2. He's a young filmmaker. He's incredibly dynamic and incredibly smart and very savvy. He's also a writer, and he's also he's very involved with kind of the Black Lives Matter universe. Even obviously pre the George Floyd kind of explosion of Black Lives Matter. And very early on, I said to him, we had a meeting and I said to him, here at Marvel, we like to reach. Like, if you could have anybody on the planet be involved in this film, who would it be? And I had already for 2 years, I had so many hip hop artists, because I already worked in a lot of hip hop, coming at me saying, yo, I heard you're making Black Panther. How do we get involved? And so anyway, so when I talked to Ryan Coogler, he said, the voice when I was writing the script was Kendrick Lamar. That's whose album I was listening to. So he's made 3 movies, and Kendrick happened to release albums on his other 2 movies while he was writing them. So Kendrick's a very important part of his DNA of the writing. And of course, I'd been approached by so many artists, every artist in town. The one who hadn't approached me was Kendrick Lamar, right? And because Kendrick Lamar he's an artist's artist. He's a true, pure artist. And I said, okay, let me just, I kind of felt like if I could just get, from what I knew about Kendrick, if I could just get Kendrick in the room with Ryan Coogler, maybe something could happen. What I was certain of was that if I just tried to use dollars and cents to make a deal with Kendrick Lamar, it would never happen. It wasn't going to be about money. And so I used a number of my relationships, and I was able to put them in a room together. And it was three of us and Kendrick Lamar's guy who started with Kendrick Lamar and his manager. They all still live in Compton. They're very real. It's as real as it gets. And sure enough, when we got in the room, when Kendrick started talking about Compton and the director started talking about Oakland, which is where he's from, there was a connection, and I knew when to not talk. And that was a really good, that was a really good time for me to fade into the background and let them talk. So very quickly, because it's a incredible kind of process on this, but essentially we approached it, I approached it, and Marvel approached it very organically. Again, we didn't make it about money. We made it about come in and see footage, come in and see what we're doing, come in and hear, see Michael B. Jordan on screen, see Chadwick on screen, like see what Marvel's all about, see what we're doing. And it's not really a secret, but the secret is we were looking for Kendrick to do one song for the movie. And Kendrick went away and we didn't hear from him for a few weeks, and we're like, uh-oh, something's not good. Because he had said he was interested in doing a song. And he was personally engaged with no manager in the room. Like he would just come and show up, and we would hang out and eat and watch footage. And then he called and he said, hey, can you guys come over to the studio? And we went to the studio, and he had written 13 or 14 songs. He was that inspired. And he was singing on almost all the tracks. He was singing the hooks, which I hadn't really heard Kendrick kind of sing. It was a little surreal. And he had also reached out to a number of his artist friends who were on brand, on message, like people that he was comfortable with. And so they had done some of the tracks. And then we sat there and we listened to the tracks. And then he looked at Ryan and said, who else would you like on the record? And Ryan said, I really want to represent Oakland, because part of the movie takes place in Oakland, and Ryan's from Oakland, and all of his movies tie into Oakland. And, it's a love letter a bit to Oakland and Africa. The director had a real desire to represent Africa. And there was a number of African artists we were talking to. And so that's how the process developed. It was almost like an indie movie with an unsigned artist creating all the music. It was very surreal. And the business was very complicated, as you can imagine. So it was the most difficult deal I ever made. It was the most difficult deal I've ever made. It's the most difficult business side. It was incredibly difficult. It was being made over Christmas break, and but it went on to get nominated for Grammy for Album of the Year. It won multiple Grammys, and we won the score record we won the Oscar for it, and got nominated and yada yada. So it was a huge success.
So one of my favorite stories that you and I have talked about is the award season for that album. That you should have won that, but I think your creative collective at Format Entertainment, someone else that you're very close with won that year, right?
So with the Kendrick record, there's no more of a shoo-in in the world that we're going to win the Grammy for the record, for Album of the Year, or for Soundtrack of the Year, than a conceptual record written by Kendrick Lamar for a film. My wife, and so it was like, oh my God, this is my year, I'm going to get that thing. And about 4 months after that movie, Black Panther, came out, my wife, who's a music supervisor, movie came out, which was A Star Is Born, and with Lady Gaga. And the minute I heard the song and saw Bradley on screen, I thought, oh shit, I'm screwed. And obviously that song, Shallow, became a massive success. So my wife and I, and it got nominated for everything. So my wife and I were nominated in every category, at every award, in the music and film side. And we just kind of decided we're not going to go to anything. So we didn't go to any awards. We sat on our couches and watched the awards together. And she always had her dress hanging up to go to the party if she won. And but she ended up sweeping the award season.
If you're ever gonna lose a Grammy, you want to lose it to your wife. That's amazing.
And we had been nominated, and she did Pitch Perfect, and I did Guardians of the Galaxy, and we were nominated on the same year for the Grammy for that, and we both lost.
I love that story so much. I love it so much. That's so I'm going to go back to some questions in the Q&A panel. How does a composer songwriter get their work in front of a music supervisor, and then how would a composer transition? How would a process like that work?
So the best there's kind of there's a filtration system that generally happens. So I get this question a lot. So the first thing I would say is don't try to punch above your weight, because the worst call you could make if you haven't done a 90-piece orchestra at Abbey Road in London for a Marvel movie, the worst thing that could ever happen to you is you get a Marvel movie, because you will start down the path, you will start to fail, you will be fired, and then somebody will be brought in who has done 90 pieces with orange. So it all goes in steps. It's just like when I said I did a bunch of independent movies and I did a tiny little studio movie, and then you move up. You want to be prepared for the opportunity and for the success. So I don't know this person. I don't know where this person is in their career. But generally, people that are starting out, the best way to get into the system and to be vetted is to work for a composer. There's kind of two paths. One is to work for a composer. A lot of composers have collectives of people that work underneath them. Collaborative, some of them are just programmers, some of them are copyists. There's all kind of various people. And those people, when I have an independent movie or I have a small movie, I might call my friend Michael Giacchino and say, hey, Michael Giacchino, I'm looking for somebody. I have a no money gig, but I think it's really cool. Do you have somebody you think is talented? And that person will say, oh, I've got this person who's worked for me for 3 years and they're incredible. And a lot of times that's how you get kind of to that next level. So that's one way to go. The other way to go is do independent movies and go to Sundance every year and pray that it gets picked up by a major distributor or that somebody watches it and cares. It's a very tough process, that process. I took the slow grind process. My wife, the very first movie she did after college was a tiny itty bitty movie called Swingers that launched Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau and a whole genre of music. And the next movie she did was at a studio level. So a hit can help. But once you have that success, once you get that success, she was then calling me because we were dating. She would call me and be like, how do I do the studio stuff? Like, I don't know how to do that level of stuff. So, anyways,
I love seeing those two different directions. Like there's not one path to get to this level. So another question here is the song Flashlight. All right. So DJ Sherlock says it was so good. And saw it was written by Sia and Sam Smith. What was the process like to create that hit? Was it commissioned for the movie? Was it already written? You talked a little bit about the Kendrick Lamar thing. Was it similar?
Which movie are we talking about?
The song Flashlight.
Well, we have Flashlight in. That's not my movie. That's one of my supervisor's movies. So
okay.
That's Julie Ann's movie. She would have to talk about that. I don't know the process.
For Pitch Perfect 2. Looks like Pitch Perfect 2.
Yeah. That's. So my wife and another music supervisor named Julia Michaels. So now I know exactly what you're talking about. So that song was created for the film. But I don't know how that exact process happened on that exact song. But they have done all three of the Pitch Perfect movies, that's an example of that's the highest level of music supervision. When you have to clear that many songs and weave them together and mash them together, that is there is such a tiny pool of people in all of Hollywood that can technically do that. From a licensing standpoint, it's incredibly difficult on the business side of it. Incredibly difficult.
So one thing that, you talk about pop culture and changes, and you're at the forefront of it. With the quarantine and COVID, how has that changed your business, the collaboration, the studio? Like, how has that been impacted?
Yeah, Marvel, specifically Marvel, was able to transition pretty quickly to online. The editorial process was a bit more difficult. I think a lot of editors had rigs in their living rooms. It's been intense. It's also been kind of great. I live in Hollywood, and not having to drive to Santa Monica to, what we call spot a movie, which is kind of like watch a movie, has been pretty great. But we persevered. The biggest problem in Hollywood is that because of COVID, we haven't been able to shoot anything. So, and the theaters is then a secondary issue, right? Is like trying to, Marvel movies have to be released in the theater to make money. It's very hard to make money streaming on Netflix for them. So that's been a challenge, but it looks like we're coming around the bend on that. We're just not shooting in America. We're gonna be shooting, most things I'm working on have kind of started back up, and it looks like we're gonna be shooting internationally for the most part. The interesting thing is on the creative side, artists are also trapped in their houses. So we're having incredible Zoom meetings with, we had a Zoom meeting with Katy Perry with 40 people, with pregnant Katy Perry talking about her new album, and we're having a chit chat. And they are, because they can't tour and because they still are writing. If anything, they're writing more. They're being forced to. And so we're just getting the most incredible access to talent than we've ever had, and live concerts in our living room. Any day of the week, there's 5 live concerts happening for some artists in their living room to us because they're trying to get into film. So it's pretty incredible, and there's some great music being written.
That's awesome. So we're coming up on time. We're gonna open this up to open networking. I'm gonna pass the clicker, I don't know what you call this thing, over to Christy in just a second. Dave, I really appreciate you making the time to do this. You and I have talked for a long time about collaborating on some stuff, and I'm excited to do that moving forward, and just appreciate you taking your time. I think the conversation we were able to have was fantastic, and hopefully the people on the call got something out of it. One last question that somebody asked is, do you still personally listen to as much music as you did when you started? Do you still have that passion for music?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no, because it's a bit like there's music that I love that feeds my soul, and then there's stuff that I have to listen to for work. The good news is I rely on a lot of my junior people to keep me fresh. So if, like, for example, if it's contemporary pop music, which I like contemporary pop music, but I don't like all of it, they will help kind of weed it out, and then it'll get to me. So I get really the best of the best. And then I do still listen to a lot of music, but it'll be a lot of like stuff that I'm passionate, like dub reggae is a huge passion of mine and always has been. Old school soul, old school hip hop. I still like contemporary hip hop. But I'm not listening to contemporary country all day long. But if a film or something needs that, I will immerse myself in it. It's a good question, though.
Thanks, Dave. Again, I appreciate.
But I still love film. I watch film nonstop. I love film.
Christy, I'll hand the mic over to you.
All right.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
This is amazing. Dave, I was like texting myself notes the whole time, like your lessons learned around leadership and how you navigated this right? They go across everyone, and I was literally like texting emails to myself the whole time. I love this idea of Creative Collective. So thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And anytime.
That would be great. Maybe next time we can get you and your wife together jointly. That'd be cool.
Oh, no. No, we do. We actually went to Japan together. We spoke in Japan together, which was awesome.
Because that has to be interesting too in that dynamic. So anyway, don't want to delve into too much, but
well,
really
here's
cool.
what I'll tell. But here's what I'll tell you. Here's what I'll tell you, Christy, which is interesting. My wife and I don't work together. So we're the same company, but we do not work on projects together. That's how we've kept the marriage together for 20 years.
So interesting. But I bet there are a lot of lessons learned around that as well.
Oh, yes.
So very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you again to Dave. I wanted to let you guys know we're going to be taking a little bit of a summer holiday. We've all been working very hard. We know school is coming back in session as well. So we're actually going to take a break the next few weeks. We are going to come back with you on September 11th. And so the next 3 weeks, we are going to be dark. But what we're going to ask is that you actually reach out to your friends and let them know about Friday Coffee Meetup so that they can join us again on September 11th. We also are interested, due to the world transitioning into a virtual environment, we would love to have university students who are interested in innovation or entrepreneurship or tech, or even, maybe a high school senior. We would love to expose them to this. So if you know educators who might want to put this as part of their extracurricular content or as an activity for their teams to do, please let them know as well. And so give us a good shout out to the people that you know, and we will look forward to seeing you again on September 11th. With that, we are going to turn it over to open networking now. So hang on the line. I'm going to turn off the recording, and then we're going to move you, if you would like to stay and ask some more questions to Dave and get to know one another. So stay on the line, and we'll move you over into the panelist pool. In the meantime, take care, stay safe, and we appreciate you joining us each week. Thank you.